The film starts with an old man who is seen watering his garden. Everything feels normal until the old man is soon left unconscious by a bug sting and falls flat to the ground. It is revealed that the old man has a young son named Jeffrey, who visits him in the hospital. On his way back, Jeffrey finds a human ear lying on the ground. He picks it up and puts the ear inside a bag and takes the evidence to the police station. That is where he meets Detective Williams, who greets him and tells him to leave the evidence with him. Jeffrey's curiosity doesn't end there and he visits Detective Williams again at his house. He greets him and they both start a conversation inside their study. The detective appreciates his curiosity but asks him to not poke too much into the case. Jeffrey understands and leaves the detective's place. As soon as he leaves the house, Jeffrey meets Sandy, the daughter of Detective Williams. The duo discusses the case and soon gets intrigued by it. Jeffrey reveals his plan to continue his own investigation and Sandy chimes in with him. Meanwhile, Jeffrey works at the hardware store that belongs to his father and completes his day job. He decides to pick up Sandy from school and asks her for lunch. Sandy agrees and they both continue their conversation at a diner. That is where Jeffrey reveals that he is going to singer Dorothy's place so that he can find out more about the case. Initially, Sandy warns him about the plan but eventually agrees to help him. Jeffrey disguises himself as a pest control guy and enters his apartment with Dorothy. She opens the door and allows him to complete pest control in the kitchen. Jeffrey finds a key to the apartment and leaves the place with Sandy. When Sandy and Jeffrey meet again, he tells her that his plan is to break into the apartment at night. She then tries to make him drop the plan but ultimately gives in to Jeffrey's curiosity. The duo makes their way to a nightclub where Dorothy sings, and makes sure that she is away from her apartment. They immediately make their way back to the apartment and Jeffrey breaks into the place. However, Dorothy returns and Jeffrey is forced to hide inside her closet. He watches Dorothy undress and is later caught by her. Dorothy threatens Jeffrey with a knife and asks him to undress himself. That is when Dorothy and Jeffrey get close to each other. They are soon interrupted by Frank, a cynical and dangerous man. Jeffrey hides inside again and then waits for Frank to leave. Meanwhile, Frank forces Dorothy for the deed, and also takes her advantage while abusing her. Jeffrey watches everything from the closet and learns that Frank is blackmailing Dorothy, and has abducted her daughter and husband. When Frank leaves, Jeffrey gets out of the closet and provides comfort to Dorothy. The next day, Jeffrey reveals his findings to Sandy. He mentions everything about the case and tells her that he will be visiting the apartment more often. It is also revealed that Sandy has a boyfriend named Mike, who is aware of their meetups. Jeffrey visits Dorothy multiple times and gets affectionate with her. On one of his visits, he is caught by Frank and his gang, whom he also saw at a local crime scene. Jeffrey believes that he is in danger and rightly so. Ultimately, Frank and his gang take Jeffrey along with Dorothy, on a so-called joyride. They take a stop at a bar-cum-private place, where Frank drinks beer and threatens Jeffrey even more. At the same place, Frank enjoys the music and becomes even more cynical. Ultimately, he allows Dorothy to visit her kid, and then takes them to another place. While on the road, Frank harasses Dorothy. He is interrupted by Jeffrey, who also resorts to a punch. Frank gets angry with Jeffrey and stops the car. He beats Jeffrey for the punch and leaves him wounded on the ground. When Jeffrey wakes up the next day, he decides that there is no other option but to tell everything to the police. He makes a call to Sandy and ensures her to tell everything to her father, Detective Williams. When Jeffrey visits the police station, he finds the same guy as the chief who was mixed up with Frank. He aborts the plan and meets Detective Williams in person. He reveals all the information and the photograph to Detective Williams and excludes Sandy from the details. The detective ensures Jeffrey that he will into the matter with seriousness and asks him to stay away from any trouble. Jeffrey drops the case completely and decides to date Sandy. He meets her on a Friday and they both go to a house party. Sandy and Jeffrey get affectionate with each other and exchange love expressions. Upon returning, they notice that a car is following them from behind. Jeffrey gets nervous and thinks that it is Frank who is following them. He speeds up the car and decides to park at his father's place, so that he can use a gun. Sandy notices that it's Mike, her ex-boyfriend, who is following them. When the car stops at Jeffrey's house, Mike threatens Jeffrey for stealing his girlfriend. But before he could do anything further, all of them notice Dorothy. Dorothy is present on the scene in a compromised manner and asks Jeffrey to help him. Mike backs off from the situation and Jeffrey starts the car. They both leave for Sandy's home where they call for the ambulance. Sandy also learns that Jeffrey was associated with Dorothy in a romantic manner. She slaps him out of disgust and asks him to explain things. Jeffrey sends Dorothy to the hospital and goes along with her. He then calls Sandy and apologizes for his past mistakes. Jeffrey also decides to take the matter into his own hands and confront Frank. He requests Dorothy to call his father to the scene as soon as possible. When Jeffrey visits the place, he finds the police chief and one other associate dead. He tries to make sense of the events but finds Frank returning to the place. Jeffrey hides inside the closet before getting noticed by Frank. Upon returning, Frank starts shooting everything in the search of Jeffrey but fails to find him. He goes inside the kitchen and shoots further. Jeffrey takes advantage of the situation and retrieves a gun from one of the dead bodies. When Frank learns that Jeffrey is hiding inside a closet, he pulls his trigger in the same direction. He takes several steps ahead of the closet and verbally informs Jeffrey about his presence. In the end, he reaches the closet with the intent to kill Jeffrey. But as soon as he opens the closet he finds Jeffrey with a gun pointed at his face. Jeffrey pulls the trigger and shoots him in the face. Frank gets blown off with the shot and drops dead on the floor, with two other bodies. Detective Williams and Sandy make it to the scene and find Frank lying dead on the floor. Detective Williams informs Jeffrey that everything is over now and that he can relax now. Things get normal, and Jeffrey and Sandy share another moment of affection. Jeffrey also apologizes to Sandy for his romantic involvement with Dorothy. The film shifts to another scene, where Jeffrey is united with Sandy and her family. It is also revealed that Jeffrey's dad is fine now, and is standing alongside Detective Williams. Everyone is getting ready for lunch and a robin sits on the windowsill. Sandy informs Jeffrey about Robin. Jeffrey's mother also watches the robin and points out the bug in her mouth. In another scene, Dorothy is united with his son and the screen fades to black. That is all for today. Subscribe and like it, if you want more videos like this.